Hi, I'm DiannaBooher. I'm thrilled to know Zig's coming out with his book, Born to Win. I first met Zig when I had written one of my first books, and I wanted to get the biggest name that I could think of to endorse that book. And so obviously I went to Zig. I didn't know him personally, so I called a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, who had claimed that Zig had changed her life. She was a housewife in Pampa, Texas, and she said that she had heard Zig on Saturday in a rally, and he was such a positive thinker. She said, I've got to have him come to Pampa. It's a small town, 30,000. She called his office on a Monday morning after hearing him on Saturday and said, will you come to Pampa and put on one of your big rallies? And he said, well, if you can fill the stadium. She had never sold a ticket. She had never put on a rally, and she sold out the stadium. And she began to do that for all around the country for the next 25 years. That's the kind of impact that Zig has on people. He was kind enough to endorse that book and several after that. But he is the kind of person who lets you know when you have an impact on his life. I was still a neophyte writer, and I came out with a book called Mother's Gifts to Me, and he sat down and wrote me, a neophyte, a personal letter telling me how grateful, how much the book had meant to him, and how grateful he was for his own mother and his upbringing. The book had touched him personally, and he wrote a personal letter to me. And I read that book over and over. I ran through my office saying, Zig Ziglar wrote me a letter. Zig Ziglar wrote me a letter. I was so excited. And he was telling me how he was using it in his Bible study class that he did in his church in Dallas with all of his men. And I thought, he's telling me how grateful he is for this letter. And I thought, here is this wonderful person who is at the height of his career taking the time to write and encourage me, because in his book, Born to Win, he talks about the power of encouragement. And he still does that. He still practices that, and he went on to encourage me. He let me use his studio, recording studio, without charge. He let me come over, and he invited me over to speak to his team. He let me talk to his team about negotiation to some foreign companies and how to, all of that, just mentoring me just through his team. He just threw the doors open wide, basically, and said, I'll teach you anything you need to know to get started. That's the kind of man he is. And just a few years ago, I was on a plane, and he always talked about his wife, Jean, being the redhead. And I thought, I've seen her. I've never met her, but I think that's her. I looked across the aisle, and I said, are you the redhead? She said, yes. She knew what I was talking about. I introduced myself, and I said, I've got a consultant here with me. It would be the thrill of her life to meet Zig. And she said, well, he's up in first class. And for some reason, they weren't traveling together. And I didn't think anything about it. Well, guess what? We got off the plane, and she and Zig were standing there at the end of the ramp waiting to meet that consultant. Again, the generosity of spirit to just stand there, and they stood there and chatted 20 minutes to just give the pleasure of that consultant, that new consultant who wanted to meet him so badly. He spent 20 minutes of his time to meet her and encourage her and talk to her. He practices that generosity of gratitude, that giving, that loving spirit. And that Born to Win book is the kind of book that tells someone the importance of those relationships and that positive thinking. He models it in his life. I'm just so thrilled that book is going to change so many lives when they get it.